Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today to our May 2026 Self-Management USA Roundtable. So today we are going to take a slightly different approach from our regular community calls. This is going to be an open discussion. We're just going to let people surface what's on their minds in the community. We have some prompts if we need to start a conversation going. During this, we hope that the intent is that you listen more than you talk, though we do have a small group, so you can maybe talk as much as you talk about that, but try to listen more. We do value real world experiences and lessons learned. We are from the Agile Space Academy. We like things to be empirical. We like things to be tested. Listen with curiosity and respect. Be open to differing opinions, but also, challenge, provide some feedback to people. We're all here to learn with this goal. And at the last 5 minutes, we'll tell you a little bit about some of the upcoming events we have scheduled through June and the end of the summer. I'll do a quick introduction of my community partner, Kat Higgins. Kat is an executive, there she is. She's an executive consultant and self-management enthusiast who has led transformations as Fortune 50s in finance, tech, and managed services. She's a tireless proponent for equity and has no limits on the scope of her vision. Currently living in South Bend, Indiana, near her 2 children and pup, Cookie.
I don't have my in front of me, so I'm gonna have to go from memory on Dom, but I think I know him. So Dom and I worked together years ago at TCS. We were in the Agile Transformation Group, and both of us were more than practitioners, kind of took the lead on, generating more go-to-market, looking at other places where we could play, reaching out to other people in what is a massive organization, if anybody's familiar with Tata, I would think. And he lives now in Charlotte with his wife and 2 gorgeous kids. Do you have 2 dogs? Is that right? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, they're around here somewhere.
So yeah, and Don, I would say, is a really amazing example of servant leadership. Sorry. Somebody who can really lift others up. So I think it bodes well with self-management, and therein lies our overlap. Because if you're aware of the Agile movement, there's an obvious relationship to self-management, and so we have invested interest in moving that forward. So he and I launched this together just because we saw a gap. We both work in a related field of succession planning, exit planning. So great. So on that note, and let me just also kind of deformalize this. So what were we thinking when we set this up to begin with? As you know, this is the first one where we have not had a speaker. So we knew that the audience would be a little bit smaller, but I thought, okay, we thought this is going to attract people who are actually interested in the community itself and not necessarily the specific content of that day. Great, because he and I have pivoted a little bit. What we are doing has changed. Our capacity to maintain this has changed. And so we've been reaching out to people who have raised a hand and said, I'd like to help, which is great also. We're also switching we had a high-low platform, but we really didn't seed it a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with what high-low is, probably not, which is why we're thinking of we're moving off a high-low platform and onto Slack. So hopefully that should be done today with any luck. That's what I'm knocking out on my to-do list. So with that being said, one of the other things that we talked about when we moved to Slack is, what do we do with these monthly meetings? Do they need to be monthly? We're kind of calling them monthly-ish. Should we be podcasting? You may have seen, and if you haven't seen, we'd love to share it with you. We have been capturing recordings on our YouTube channel to just so anybody can consume the content later on. So to that end, and in the context of what keeps anyone from being able to self-manage, one of them is capacity. So we're experiencing that and thought, okay, this is a good tie-in. Let's find out what other people are experiencing with obstacles to self-management. Right?
Sorry, nudge the mouse. Sorry about that.
No problem. So are we ready for the prompt? We've just put together a poll everywhere. Do you want me to share that, Don?
Sure, if you want to share that in the chat. I think it might be pinned as well.
Okay, great. So if you can, oops, that's the wrong. There we go. So I just thought I'd put up a prompt in here rather than talk over each other. So if you guys see this, there's a link here, which is also pinned in the chat. You can also use this QAR code. You can be anonymous if you want. You can come in as who you actually are. But kind of what are some of the things that you're experiencing or seeing or believe, preferably specific experiences, like actual experiences. But if not, that's okay. can be on a micro level. I've tried to impose some self-management in my team, not impose, but allow space for self-management in my team, create some empowerment, or higher organizational, or in the US, as I'm trying to work with organizations to do self-management, what are those obstacles? Or even in this community. So any context at all. Let's give that, what do we think, 3 minutes? Too long, too short? Our meeting doesn't have a timer function, does it? I don't think so.
All right, that's 3 minutes on the clock. There's a timer.
I read that HR and it looks like air conditioning, only hair conditioning. What happened? Oh, there it goes. Oh, by the way, if you want it to appear one word, but it's actually more than one, you can hyphenate or underscore and it'll keep it together. Looks like poll everywhere actually changed this function. So when I've seen it before, it makes the most likely one bigger. So if you see it and you agree, like if you agreed with benefits, it would get bigger. But now it looks like it's like scrolling through them, which is interesting. Anyway, that's okay. Can still talk about them. Is there another way to display that maybe?
Seems like they've, well, I was about to say they slowed down, but
I just would like to see them all. Stupid poll everywhere. This is what happens when you experiment. Never experiment, you guys. Change is hard, yeah. Mm. There it goes.
all right, Kat, well,
At 3? Are we at 3 minutes?
we got 10 seconds left, something like that.
I don't know if there's any way to pause this. Anyway, we can kind of see now. Okay, stop that poll, everyone. Good enough. Good enough.
It's very
Great.
difficult to tell what's actually going in there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty neat though. Like I think fear and power dynamics seem to be popular, and I would agree. Change competing. Any so let's just round robin. Like I don't have to facilitate anymore. There's only what 8 of us, is that right? So anything in here that is like, wow, I would not have thought of that, or I don't know what that means. Let's pull these outliers first so we can get on the same page. Is there anything that somebody looks at and wants to know what did somebody else mean by that? I see some competing ones: leadership mindset and lack of leadership.
When I look at direct benefits, I think about that and I do wonder what the contributor had in mind.
Direct benefits?
Yeah, I can speak to that one. And thanks for that's great. So yeah, for me, like yeah, like working with business owners or executives, they want to have a very clear, defined outcome of both the overall like transformation and what it's, what's in it for me. They're like kind of relying on the, empowered people and I mean, there are metrics, right? There are like outcomes of going to self-management. But I think like kind of trickling that down to all the activities, and just having very clear outcomes and benefits for the company, so it's kind of tied probably to like probably profit over people in a way, right? Like, what is the actual benefit of this for the profit or the company? That's what I meant by it. And if people haven't seen that, or if they're like, no, I've perfectly been able to, qualitate the benefits to people, I'd love to hear that.
So I have seen some discussion on that in the Corporate Rebels chat. Like Wayne said, we just did the master's program, so we have access to this, I think, for 1 year. And there are other people. There's actually a chat. The AI note taker will remind me. In our, every time we do one of these meetings, we set up like a follow-up email saying, here's what we discussed, any references in there, and here's what's coming up next. So I will send some of the information that was posted there about how to quantify those benefits, because yeah, that's very real. If you're selling anything, like, why would I do it? And I think it sounds like and feels like something that's going to be very expensive with no tangential benefits, right? So that would make people resist it, so to speak. I agree.
Yeah, I'm glad you
If
shared.
I could jump in. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
I was just going to say that I was, you came from a different perspective, which was those that would be transitioning. And I was thinking about, the benefits of those participating. So it was good to hear that perspective.
Can you say more about that? What is the difference in your mind?
Well, selling the corporate leaders or organizational leaders is different than what are the benefits to the individual. And I've got a fledgling self-managed organization, and there's that movement toward integration for frontline team is probably equally as tricky, because I don't know that they see the benefits, or you got to experience them before you really believe them.
First of all, I'd love to hear more about the context of where you're applying this. If you could give us a little bit more information about your organization. And second of all, that's interesting because I would have thought the opposite. Like, I feel like, especially coming from agile transformations, the teams wanted it, always wanted it. The executives wanted it when it was like, oh, everyone else in every company is doing this. I better do this to keep up, or I'm going to be behind and, I'll be outpaced. But I don't know that they ever really internalized that the factor of empowerment of those teams was a huge benefit or a necessary benefit to creating that agility. And I think that self-management is very related to that. That the motivations of leadership and teams are very different, but everybody wants empowerment, theoretically. Isn't always true, to your point. Anyway.
No, I think there's a lot of risk with empowerment. It requires decision-making and risk-taking, and then owning those decisions and living with the consequences and belief that that's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I want to sort of support what Greg's saying there. As we've been going through this, there's a certain element within my organization of teams already making decisions at a certain level, but above that level, getting people to really step up and accept that responsibility and see the value there. And I've been doing reading on that like, what did they talk about it as? Positive rights and negative.
Is that
right?
Alexis?
Pardon?
Alexis's talk?
Perhaps.
The constraints, the one on constraints?
I don't remember exactly, but the gist, no, not on constraints. It's more around, you can create opportunities for people to step into responsibility. But if the people haven't done the personal work, they haven't had the opportunity for themselves as an individual to sort of grow their confidence, to understand and step in and take the authority that's been offered to them, they're not comfortable doing it. And so you really need to balance both of those things in terms of developing the organizational structure as well as developing the individuals.
Yes. And they're related too, right? At the end of the day, the measurement of success is that they feel psychologically safe to experiment.
Yes.
So are you creating a safe environment, and are you validating it by confirming that they feel safe? Because that's hard. Yes, boss, I feel safe is a natural, right? You're always going to get a yes, theoretically. How do you tell a boss you don't feel safe with it? You don't feel safe with them because you wouldn't feel safe to do it.
Yeah. Oh, just something Wayne kind of mentioned, and it's on here, it's on the change, right? And like, you know, entrenched culture, it touches on those. But one thing, it's funny, I was thinking about it earlier because I knew we were going to talk about this topic, and I was like, I'm going to bring this up, and then I completely forgot to put it in the word cloud. But one of the things that I was, when Kat and I were talking about, was the lack of a coupled change management approach to a lot of the frameworks that I've seen in the self-management space. Like the frameworks are very much describing this is a state, this is kind of these rules or circles and, you know, tensions. You're gonna operate within this space, but the change management on a personal and an organizational level to get there is not as clear cut. So the moving to it is you know, sometimes underlooked outside of specific change management. You know, we get too focused on what we want it to look like, you know, this future, and that's great, you know, having this vision of it, but then the process to get there is maybe an afterthought sometimes. So the change management that comes along.
Or it's just really abstract, so a process isn't really clear. So this is an interesting story. We were meeting with Brent and Charlie, who I don't think is on this call today, but both of them had offered to kind of help with the community. It's great, by the way. Thank you, Brent. And I said, you know, we could use some help promoting these events. So we looked at tools and we found Buffer. Turns out when I went to search for more US companies doing self-management, Buffer was one of them. But they failed and pivoted. They said their people didn't like it. It's an interesting story. And it sounded like they just went, no rules, no bosses, and no structure, and no measurements of success. And it was like, rip the Band-Aid off before the wound is healed kind of thing. So it didn't work, but the story was not like, here's how we went about it. It didn't sound like they did anything to go about it, which was maybe not the best.
Yeah, it's kind of like training for a marathon, and you're like, I'm just going to run a marathon, right? And yeah. But when you had your hand up there.
I just, is it okay if I share something in the chat? This is what I was actually referencing.
Absolutely.
And then people can visit it at their own
Yeah,
leisure.
absolutely.
I'm going to find this Buffer self-management story too.
Yeah, I got that open. I'll drop that in the chat.
Yeah, let's do that. It's a great story. Also,
Yeah.
just ironic that we were going to use it for a self-managing group and they failed at self-management. What else is in here? Anybody wants to share that they put in or felt strongly about or curious about? Let's self-manage.
Yeah, I can chime in here. I put corporate conditioning in here. I put operating systems in here, leadership mindsets. These are all things that I've found to be barriers when trying to put this stuff into place. I think, you know, especially I've operated at the executive level for several years now. So like CTO, CTPO kind of roles, working directly with CEOs. And I've found that within my domains, I usually have a lot of latitude to put stuff into place. I'm also a deep agilist, trained all the way up through Agile Coach, done those kinds of transformations over and over. Much easier to put in place than trying to bring these kind of more self-management ideas in. I try to usually do it through the lens of self-organization first, because that's an Agile principle. But then as soon as I get to you know, the topics of power dynamics and empowerment, I meet resistance, because the other leaders that I work with have been conditioned in a way to feel like they have to control, they have to see the future, they have to work towards metrics that don't really matter to, you know, from a people standpoint, and it becomes super hard to convince them that that there is another way.
Well, because
yeah, so they've been conditioned, and not only the leaders have been conditioned, the people working, even the middle management and even the people in the trenches just expect this kind of structure. Like there are a lot of followers out there that just would prefer to be told, here's what your tasks are. And it's hard for them to even switch into a kind of structure where they get to make their own decisions. It's like, pushing decisions out to the edges is hard for the people receiving that kind of freedom, because they don't see it that way. They see it as, oh my God, now I'm walking on eggshells. And I don't know, if I step in the wrong place, I could get in trouble, even though they've been empowered with this decision-making capability. So I always try to lead now with process and operating systems, because, more freedom doesn't mean less process. It actually means more process. And
I would disagree.
I think that, so I used to disagree with that until I recognized that process means decision-making capabilities. Process means the ability to unpack feedback together. Like there are certain kinds of processes that I think are missing in conventional companies, like even the ability for a leader to actively listen. Active listening is a kind of a process, and I had to be convinced of that, over time. But I think especially the notion of decision making, that when decision making is top down, there's not a lot of process involved. But when decisions are distributed to the edges, I think that having a set of potential ways of decision-making processes is really important to a team. So when you empower someone to make a decision, are they using the advice process? Are they using consensus? Are they using consent? And help them understand what that process actually means and give them the tools to actually do that process effectively. That's what I mean by process.
I think there's a distinct difference between processes and constraints, which is why I really liked the talk from Alexis. Was it December, I think, which if you ever wanted to watch, it was on our YouTube. And the difference is that a process is it's an imposed structure rather than a freedom to create a structure to solve a problem within certain boundaries. The boundaries of our shared outcome, the boundaries of our team agreement, whatever those things are. Process is defined, it's rigid. Like it's like to be 1 degree less than that would be a framework. In other words, you can make whatever process you want within this framework. Those are constraints. That's why I'm saying I would challenge that the solution is a process, because you then lose some autonomy of self-management. You're no longer self-managing. You're just following steps. Interesting.
I hadn't really had it framed that way before. I always feel like process is something you all agree to, and not that it's imposed.
Either way, but even if you're agreeing, you're now imposed. So I'm on a team.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
Process. Yeah. Now we have to follow this process instead of, at what point can I say, hey, I've thought of another way to solve this problem or address this issue. Can we agree that this outcome would work? That it's worth experimenting to obtain this outcome, but because it's still within the agreed constraints.
Gotcha. Oh, interesting. Thank you for that clarification. Now I'm leaning back the other way.
And Kat, you said that's covered in the talk by Alexis on constraints.
Find that and I'll post it. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting and helpful right now.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, and Erica, I'd love to have a one-on-one with you on some things you mentioned, but I have seen it, I think, a little bit kind of similar to you, like a little bit, because I am a process-driven person, and I see in a way to avoid certain, I see some structure as being helpful, like voting, right? That's a way of making sure we're doing things kind of in a fair manner. I'm wondering, do you follow like a sociocracy or holacracy? Do you have like a set operating model for self-management that you normally use or lean towards?
I don't have a set operating model. I borrow from a lot of different models. Of course, I've been influenced by Frederick Laloux and his writing. I was really influenced for a while by Brave New Work and the notion of the self-management operating system. I don't know if you're familiar with Aaron Dignan's work. And because I'm also a technologist, this kind of framing resonated for me. But he's got like a 10, and it may have been expanded to 12 outside of the book, domains in which he sees self-management being kind of approached. You know, there's different lenses, and you know, he writes like purpose is one of these domains, and autonomy is another domain, and so he talks about the kinds of processes for one thing that need to be in each of those domains to support self-management. You know, I've seen enough feedback about holacracy to be careful with that kind of a structure. It's a really hard one to maintain. It, as you know, with it, I guess if fully applied the way that it's laid out, companies always have trouble with that. So I've kind of learned that you have to experiment more and figure out what it is that the particular company, you know, being like in different industries, even for instance, like manufacturing company is going to be very different than a software company. And you just can't apply the same formula to every company. So in this book that I wrote, Organizing for Impact, I actually cover a whole bunch of different structures and talk about the benefits of using them for different situations. You know, Doug Kirkpatrick is another influence on me too. So the Morningstar model, very different from, you know, it's running on agreements that underneath it all really kind of line up a whole bunch of processes. So I've got really weird perspectives, I guess, on how to put this stuff together. But I'm more of a systems thinker than someone who's going to align with one particular system. I need to see the situation before I can apply something to it.
Sounds good. Thank you, Erica. I'll connect with you offline. Kat's got her hand up.
Sure.
Well, I did, but I'm going to just pause because I've been in the mic for a little bit. Anybody else looking in here going, I'm wondering something, I'd like to ask something, or what does that mean? Or here's what I wanted to bring up. Anybody we haven't heard from?
I just apologize for being late. Demo appointment ran long. Sorry about that, but really glad to be here and hope to hear the whole recording.
Do you want to do just a quick intro? We'd love to hear from you. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from California. I'm part of Human First Works, and we're aligned with Obran, and we tend to try to find companies and turn them into worker co-ops. That's our current biggest activity. But we also work with companies that are interested in becoming more teal-like. But I just loved what you were just saying, that good ideas come from lots of places, not from just one theory.
Yep. So your organization, Matt Spar is on your group, right?
Travis.
Yeah, Matt and I are working on with a company in Japan right now, helping them deliver self-management to their 80-person company, tech company.
Very nice. So for those of you who don't know who that is, Matt will be presenting. This group does the teal landscape report where they collect all the data. And earlier we were kind of talking a little bit about how to quantify the value of self-management. Some of that, a lot of that is in this teal report. Rebecca, if you want to send the 2025 link in the chat, I think people would really love that. And the 2025 comes out in September. Matt will be presenting that to this group.
You bet. Happy to do that. Thank you. And
Very much.
And apologize for being late.
Oh, not at all. This is lunch. We're all low key, self-managing, munching, and sharing.
And that's right. Travis is my partner. Yeah, that's correct. You got it.
Awesome. He's the one that brought me into meeting all these people.
Nice. And I think he's involved in the Corporate Rebels North American cell also. Travis is.
We keep her busy. He's a fast mover, I can assure you.
Yeah. No, your group's doing wonderful things. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's give you the mic. You haven't spoken, I don't think. Is there anything on here where you're like, oh, I'd love to say something about that, or what did somebody mean by that? We just did a little poll everywhere and asked everybody to kind of populate what do they think their perceived obstacles are. Feel free to share anything, or anybody else want to raise a hand. We talked about benefits.
Does anyone want to talk about power dynamics? I know it's probably a giant topic. Kind of curious. Those who put it down there.
I think it might have been me. I don't remember if that was me or not. I know I said something about power. Yeah, that is me. Yeah. So on that same line of, people in management resisting self-management. I mean, yeah, because we don't need them if all they're going to do is manage other people who could manage themselves. So they feel threatened because the means by which they gained success in the past is going away. If they embrace this, it's like a person whose job is being automated. If all you do is pull a lever and we're going to put automation in, you're going to resist it. If instead I tell you, hey, instead of pulling that lever, we'll train you to run these automation machines, and you'll be in charge of this whole area of the factory, you don't resist it because I've taken the time to tell you what your new value will be to the organization. Now, some people don't want the new value. That's okay. But then the question becomes, do you have individual investment in the shared outcome of this organization? If you don't, this isn't the place for you. If you do, then that organization, I believe, because they hired you in the first place, this is more of an ethical conversation, so it's my opinion and not necessarily some research fact, that they would then have an obligation to help you find where you would best contribute and validate that it has, a greater value than the cost of you staying, right? That's why we keep any employees. So I think there's kind of two paths to someone resisting. But the first question is, are you invested in this outcome? So that's what I mean by power dynamics. You have to shift the value of a person. But there are some people who only feel like the only reason I want to be in this role is because everything's better if I hold power. Which I often semi-joke that if you are a leader and you are the most valuable opinion in the room, there can only be two reasons. Either you're dumb and everyone else actually is smarter collectively, or you suck at hiring, right? Those are the only two reasons why you could have the best ideas that I can think of.
Kat, there's a third one. I would add that we're learning, especially in very strong cultures like in China and Japan, this company that we're working with, there is just this culture of not speaking up to bosses.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one of the biggest challenges is saying, wait a minute, we know you have a good idea. We know that you have done this. We know that you're on the front line. What's broken? And there's this shyness about, or it's not shyness. It's just a cultural pattern of being careful or sharing carefully, I guess is what I would say.
Yes.
So I think that one of the things we've been using is the culture map, which has been really helpful to understand how to give feedback, how to share information, all sorts of things.
That explains why people might not answer. I think my two comedic sort of responses were, why would people not invite? Why would a leader not value the opinions of their subordinates? But so I'm curious to hear. So you mentioned this tool, but walk us through a little bit. When you see that happening, how do you coach around it? What are some examples of things that work when you have identified there's a cultural barrier here to empowering a team because they would feel it would disrespect a leader, if I'm phrasing that correctly?
You're saying it exactly right. What we find is getting them in small groups without their leader, with their leader's knowledge, but getting the ideas out, getting them documented, and then having them present them to the leader. But it's that first speaking that is really hard.
So is that because they don't want their individual name on it to look like they're being contrarian?
It's not they're not necessarily going against what a leader has said, but more concerned that they don't know the leader's perspective before offering the idea. And so there's this I don't want to show up my leader. There oftentimes what has happened is they will go and with encouragement, go and explain to the leader why this process or this technique or this approach is a better approach, but it's a one-on-one conversation so the leader can announce it versus the individual announcing it, because it's the leader's role to define what should happen. Now that's so different than self-management, and getting them to just get that dialogue going is important.
Yeah.
And then the leader turning around and giving them decision rights in that area because they know the answer is the next step, or at least that's what we're finding is working.
Interesting. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, no, Rebecca, thank you for sharing that. It reminded me of something I came across, the crew resource management, basically in like airplane cockpits. There in certain cultures, there's would the co-pilot challenge the pilot, kind of like for the reasons you said, and when they wouldn't, well, then the plane crashed because it ran out of fuel and some other preventable things. So the airlines put together crew resource management, and it's mostly on communication, actually. So it's something that's interesting. Maybe you're familiar with it, but cool. Anyway, so I was actually going to refer back to what Kat was saying about power dynamics, right? And like, it's a term that I haven't thought about for a while, and like, it's something that's like, yeah, that's bad, right? Power dynamics are bad, but then I was like Googling it, and I was like, if power dynamics are just like I defer to somebody because I think they're better in that subject. Like that's kind of a power dynamic, right? Like I defer to the marketing person because I think they're better, not because of a hierarchy they have. Like there can be power dynamics that I think are natural. And then I was thinking about, should our org structure adapt to it? Like maybe that's the thing, or would this become some type of echo chamber? So what type of power dynamics does it reinforce or, resist? And I was also kind of thinking on there, it's like, is self-management for everyone? Like, and that's something that's come up, right? Like and is that okay? Can you be in a self-managing company if you're just going to self-manage your own work? You're just going to do your function, right? Or is that still possible? I'm sorry, I kind of went on a tangent, but yeah, that's one thought. If how much you go with power dynamics or you counteract power dynamics, I guess that's maybe something I'm mulling over. But Wayne, you got your hand up. You can take it however you wish.
Thank you. I wanted to, Rebecca, it's so exciting that you mentioned the culture map. About a third of my employees are Mexican. And I realized early on there was a language barrier, but there was also a culture barrier. And the culture map, the book, and then following up with doing, further research on that really helped me get to a point of how do I connect with the people when they want a hierarchy and that's not what I'm giving them, and how do we move through that and still, respect each other, and how do I get them to a point where they see the benefits of what we're doing? And so I wanted to give a little, this book is written by a management consultant who's done research on, I think, all the countries in the world, and basically has done surveys where they have ranked each culture on 8 different criteria. Mm-hmm. And every country falls, somewhere between the black and the white on that. One of the ones that we were dealing with specific, just to kind of give a quick example, is America's what is called a low context communicating culture. So we make everything that we want to communicate, we're very explicit about it. We'd rather write out lots of documents, make sure everyone understands it the same. The other end of the spectrum is Japan, where the expectation is on the listener to listen to the messages that are being said without explicitly them being said, and to understand the meaning that's being conveyed underneath. It turns out that Mexico is pretty far along in terms of being high context also. So when I would stand up and I would say, we're going to do this, this, and this, talking to in particular, one individual who's from Mexico later, I'm like, were you always trying to figure out what I actually meant? He's like, yeah, I was always looking for all of these additional layers that you were alluding to, but not saying. And I was like, let me help you. I have no other layers. I'm super simple. I'm very explicit. And he's like, oh, that makes this a lot easier. But if you don't call out that distinction for them to understand how you're communicating, and there's the 7 other factors as well, you get tripped up a lot in that regard. So I just wanted to share that if it's helps for anyone else.
That detail was just great. And I will say that as a B Corp, we decided that we would recruit people from all over the world. We have people in Venezuela, we have people in Kenya, we have people in South Korea. They're all bright, talented people. And we did the culture map of each one of them, and it really helped us improve our communications. So spot on. Yeah.
Very nice. Any other thoughts? If not, I would really like to learn more about Greg's organization, because I don't think we've heard about that yet. Oh, I'm sorry, Dom. I didn't know you had.
No, yeah, no worries. Let me add one thing. Wayne, that's a really good point on the context language, like high or low, and if the burden is on the speaker or the recipient. And there's this not fun example, but there's a link to it where during a Korean War, the U.S. and the British generals were communicating, and the British were kind of getting overwhelmed. And when the U.S. asked them, do you need help? And the British guy said, it's getting a bit sticky over here. And the U.S. guy was like, oh, okay, all right, it's tough, but it's war, so you're fine. But the British guy, because he expected the British guy to explain what he really needed, and the British guy was assuming the American would kind of know that because his British admirals would, and he was like kind of getting overwhelmed. So they didn't send the Americans didn't send reinforcements. The British ended up getting overwhelmed, and it's a very tangible example of that high versus low context communication cultures in practice. But fun story, fun. Sorry, back to your question, Kat.
Well, and even more like the idea, we're talking about power like it's linear too, right? It's not. It's multidimensional. So this kind of power may have a high or low value in one culture. Another type of power may have a higher or lower value in another culture.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, yeah, can I circle back and ask about, I'm just curious, Greg, because we love when there's practitioners here. So can you tell us a little bit about your organization, where you guys are at in your journey? What made you want to be more self-managing? Are you muted? I think you might be muted. And thanks for coming also. Can you guys hear him? It's just me.
He might be eating, yeah, or something like that.
Oh, well, we can circle back. That's okay. Sorry, Greg. What else do we find in here? We could talk about our own. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just say also, because it connects into the power dynamics. It was mentioned, I think, Dom, I think you mentioned this, and it sort of was alluded to by some other people. Sorry? That not everyone wants to be a leader. And in my experience, right or wrong, I think that people are either afraid to be a leader or are overwhelmed by things where they don't feel comfortable stepping into that role. And I've seen, and we've really only been on this journey for 6 or 8 months at my companies. There's some people that as soon as the opportunity was there, they stepped into it. There's other people where it took 4, 5, 6 months. And there's other people that haven't really come along yet. And I feel like some of those people, they need role models. They need to see this person did it, that person's like me, and it was safe for them before their comfort zone, sort of opens up. But part of the way I've been maybe softening that is to talk about how I want everyone to be a leader, but to be a leader at the right time on the things that you have capabilities to be leading on. So changing this notion of leadership from sort of a hierarchical one into one that's more about capacity and capability. And there's that fluctuation in terms of, oh, the situation has changed. We don't need a leader of this type anymore. We need a leader of this other type, and figuring out how to make that fluid.
So like
I don't know if that's helpful, but sorry.
you talking about more like meritocracy? Power
I
by
like
merit?
that word.
Meritocration?
It's like situational leadership, I guess, in a way. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
makes
like
sense.
that term. I haven't heard it, but yeah, Dom, I think that captures it. But also not like at this time, this person is the leader of the team, but more like this person is really good at counting. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it turns out if you do manufacturing, counting is actually really hard. When it comes time to do a quality control check and do the counting, let's have the people that are good at counting step up and lead that part of it. But when we're doing, we have a welding problem, well, this person knows all about welding. They're the person that steps in and solves that problem. So it's, situational in a like almost a minute to minute way, not in a like, this big challenge has come from outside and we need to restructure the business.
I think that is theoretical meritocracy. And just full disclosure, I realize that there are lots of issues with the concept of meritocracy, mainly because I just left Red Hat, which claimed to be a meritocracy organization with lots and lots of flaws in that. But from the most abstract form, the idea of prioritizing value by knowledge and its merit, information, its merit seems like feasible, would make sense. We've had that in this group. Dom and I have talked about, like, what do we share? If we're not sharing, are we going against our own principles of valuing self-management? But we've established relationships with speakers. We've kind of done the homework on what works in the group. We've figured out what works for posting an event. We've figured out what doesn't work for posting an event, what works for promoting, what hasn't. If we bring new people in, they haven't had those experiences. Should we open the floodgates and let it fail, knowing that we've already seen some of these experiments fail? Or how do we absorb them in a way that is also empowering? It's been challenging, and we're not even making money off of this. Like, it's still challenging in a little volunteer group that just wants speakers 12 times a year. Like, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Any other examples of people wrestling with that?
I will say Greg's back on camera. I don't know if you want to revisit your earlier question, Kat. Sorry.
Well, let's see.
Oh, there we go.
I managed the technology. I'm revealing myself as a brewer by trade here.
You see a brewer?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I've got it's a 22-person regional brewery in Washington State. I think it's 2017, 16, encountered reinventing organizations, and then maybe before that, and then we worked to implement holacracy. I think the discovery we made was there's so many kind of fundamental organizational, cultural expectations of self-management or understandings that trying to do it unstructured was not going to work, like Morningstar. That doesn't mean it's working. And what, Dominic, you said something that caused me to think about maybe a recent insight we're having, which is self-management. Maybe it does fit into the power structure of, all right, I'm the CEO, or the chief boss hole is my favored title. So there's a power dynamic. I'm the primary shareholder, okay? And there are people who are expressing a lack of desire or willingness to self-manage. So we've been talking about how to organize our business in a way that could make room for people who aren't self-managed. You come in and you've been given instruction and you've been given clear limits, and then also at other levels where there is self-management happening and making the pathway for people and attempting to make it look appealing, which we may not have done a very good job of that, so that people see the benefit and they want to come along and join the self-managed activities. But yeah, I've heard things like, I never wanted to run a business, so why are you asking me to get involved in the finance? And then that just fear of decision making, and the that kind of blends back to the talk about psychological safety. And we can create environments, and there's still that self-work and that self-confidence that
if absent, just, people are reluctant to step forward.
That's a great, thank you for sharing that, Greg. And I'd love to learn more about your company. That's a reminder. If anybody wants to drop your LinkedIn, just so we can connect out of here, that would be good. But that's really interesting, Greg. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, please do drop your LinkedIn. Also, Greg, I would love to point you to, I had posted the YouTube channels earlier. In January, we flew to Austin and broadcast from Banger Sausage Beer Garden. I'm sure their COO, Albert, would love to talk to you. Siegel, their founder. They had some really great stories. I mean, that was actually my favorite one. I don't know if you guys saw that. Like, they got emotional. They were talking about some mistakes they made with good intentions. And you could just really see how much they cared about their people and what was driving them to undertake such a difficult thing anyway. Like, they could just run a restaurant and not care, but they do very much care. It was very touching. What else?
I'm thinking, that's what drove me was I never wanted to be a boss. I remember an 8th grade teacher asking me to, step into my leadership. And I just remember the feeling of disgust of her saying that. So I've been reluctantly doing this leading business and wanting to have other people step into that feeling of power, but it doesn't come without it. I'll harm people. I harm people all the time. It's unfortunate, and it is out of good intention.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing, man. Yeah.
We are at 4 till. This was a better talk than I expected it to be. Not that my expectations were low. I really like some of our speakers, like really always bring whiz bangs, but this was a lot of good ones too. So first of all, drop your LinkedIn in there so that we all have it. And again, this will be in our output when we always do a post event follow up. So we'll share those. I'm assuming that you guys would be okay with that. Anything else anybody wants to land on? And if not, we'll kind of talk about what's coming up next in the community. Great. Do we have a slide for that, Dom? Just to do
I got it up. Hopefully. Yep. Can you all see the slide?
Fly by, don't they? I feel like.
So coming up, we do have some speakers again, month-ish. We have June coming up, Peter Laughter. His talk is going to be on self-management in the Quaker community, which just found really interesting. We have the title to be determined. August, we are looking to get a representative from, and like, this is not 100% set in stone, but like, we have commitment that we are going to have Brian Robertson talking
when he is speaking. We just don't know exactly when.
Yeah. So, but he's a great guy. Obviously, a founder of Holacracy Run, Glass Frog founder, knows a thing or two about holacracy. Really interesting. And then coming up September, again, date TBD, but Matt Spar from the Teal Landscape, Teal Team and Teal Landscape Report is going to be speaking about that, and a great resource. He knows a lot, does a lot of research. So we do have some good talks coming up, and always taking nominations for more.
Looking for companies, cases, approaches, some thought leaders, but again, we want to kind of lean on more empirical. So any cases, any U.S. companies you have, we'd love to reach out to them and say, can we visit? Can we have you speak? Can we have you present? Maybe it's not even the founder. If you want to find somebody who's just a practitioner. We've had a lot of founders, and that's nice, but it's also, I think, good to hear what is it like when, you're on the front lines? How do you experience it differently? So
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you for doing this.
Thanks, everybody. We'll send you a follow-up within the next week or so, and hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.
Thank you all.